Welcome to Mental Health Mondays. We are so happy that you are here with us. Thank you for sticking around. We're starting a little bit late because of some technical issues. We have been gone for just a little bit over a month, so really like 6 weeks. And so we have not been here with you, but we are so thankful to be here with you this evening. Want to welcome my co-host, Dr. Ricardo White.
Good to see you again.
Yes, good to see you as well. We have missed all of you. I know it's the day before the last day of January, but Happy New Year to everyone because we haven't seen you since last year. So hope everything is going well in your life. If it is not, and you feel like you need mental health professionals help, please reach out to someone in your area. We always encourage that here on Mental Health Mondays, but we are just thankful to be back with you and that you are here with us tonight. So please put in the chat where you are watching from. I saw some were watching from earlier before we actually went live. Let's see. I saw some and now I'm not seeing. Well, welcome wherever you are watching from.
I see Longview, Texas.
Okay, Longview, Texas. I saw that. You could, yes, welcome from Longview, Texas.
We got New York.
All right.
We got Charlotte, California, my
California. Hometown. Yes, my home state as well. Yes, so we are so happy that you are here. We want to jump right into our topic since we're starting a little bit behind schedule here. Unless you've been living under a rock, which I know none of you have been living under a rock, but most of you should know about what happened and what's been in the news for the last several days. But it was and we have to call it for what it is. It was the killing or murder of Tyre Nichols in Memphis, Tennessee by five police officers who have been fired and were arrested, then they let out on bail, but have been they have all been charged with murder. Some first degree, I think 1 or 2 first degree, and some second degree charges for murder have been brought up against the other one. So we are going to talk about this tonight through a mental health lens. And so we appreciate your respectful comments and, of course, your questions. And we're going to tackle that this evening.
Yeah, as best we can. Yes. It's been the tradition of the church in many ways to at times avoid talking about these hot button issues.
Right.
And it's the goal of your pastor, the Northeastern Conference, to say, you know what, that's not going to be the approach.
Right.
We don't think it's terribly therapeutic to just avoid discussing these issues. Right. And where there's real dialogue and good information, there's a greater chance for healing and for evolving.
Yes.
So that we can get better.
Yes, we want to get better.
We want to get better
as a society. I just want to say a welcome. I'm sorry, the welcome is going all the way to Brisbane, Australia. So I want to say a special welcome to I don't know if I'm saying it right, but JD from Brisbane, Australia. Welcome to Mental Health Mondays. It has to be Tuesday, probably in the early afternoon, or maybe early afternoon. So, welcome.
Believe it or not, I've talked to people who were oblivious to this event occurring. So
Really?
if you want to give a summary,
Okay.
we're not newscasters, by the way, so we'll
No.
do the best that we can to kind of give you the details. But Sister Tanya,
Right.
if you want to just give the summary as what you understand has occurred, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah. So again, we're not newscasters, but from what I have gathered from the last several days, so as I said, 5 police officers um brutally beat Tyree Nichols, and he died from those injuries. And he was pulled over. From what I understand, it was like, I believe, a traffic violation. I don't even know if that was completely confirmed.
An alleged traffic
An
violation.
alleged traffic violation.
The police chief, Sarah Lynn Davis, mentioned when she was being interviewed sometime back, and these are ongoing developing events, so forgive us if what we tell you is outdated. Again, we're not newscasters.
Right.
We may fail at this, but what we don't want to fail at is talking about these issues and acknowledging that they're occurring. That's what we don't want to fail at, but we may make mistakes, so please forgive us in advance. Yes. And we really would like to bring healing and not further inflame things, but yet again, forgive us, because we're not perfect, but we're going to do the best that we can. So Chief Sarah Lynn Davis, in response to that question, when I saw her interviewed, she mentioned that the alleged violation, despite their video camera review, had not been substantiated at the time of her speaking, at the time of the interview that I saw.
Right.
Yes. So maybe by now, maybe they found some new stuff, but the interview that I saw, she said it hadn't been substantiated.
I saw that same interview. And what has really saddened the nation, or society in general, is that, even if it was a traffic violation, he was treated and not in a humane way. He was treated as if he was not even a human. So the way that they beat him, and I saw reports today that he was given 71 commands. I don't know if you saw that as well, but I think 71 commands in like a very short amount of time. Like, he'd be laying on his back and they would say, "Get on your back." And then if he didn't, then they would do more beatings. And so it was the way he was treated.
And we don't want to be disrespectful of his humanity. So we want to first and foremost say sincerest condolences to the Nichols family.
Right.
Sincerest condolences to, I believe his mom is Ravon Wells. Forgive me if I mispronounced the name, but sincerest condolences to you and your family and the community that this is impacting. Because it's painful. It's painful. I was, you're going about your day, and it's like, we'll be wearing this face. And so I remember, saying to a coworker, did you hear what happened? And the face, it was just downcast. It's like the shift was so dramatic. It's like, just so you guys get a little context, you'll see us working and acting like everything is okay, but it's a facade. The tears just couldn't stop flowing as I was watching that video.
Right.
You know what it took me back
to? I couldn't watch it. I couldn't watch it.
And I don't encourage, you should know yourself. You got to know yourself.
Yeah, I know myself. I know I couldn't watch it. I can't get images and sounds and things out of my head.
It reminded me back in the day of Bedford-Stuyvesant, Brooklyn, New York, where sometimes you could just end up in the wrong place at the wrong time. And this was back in the 1980s when these communities were flooded with crack cocaine, and it was just a different time. And you could end up in the wrong place at the wrong time, and the beating could be savage. Anyway, those were some of the images that kind of brought back to my mind.
And I want to say also, for those who may not, just giving a little bit more overview, is that he was unarmed as well. And there was 5 police officers to 1 unarmed man. And so they weren't in danger, and because they weren't. And so, just looking at this, people ask the question, how could this happen? How could something like this, happen? And I think I know because I've heard it, but people even said, wow, these police officers were Black. These were not white police officers. And so, how could this happen? I think we're going to talk about that tonight.
Yeah, we're
The
going to try.
dynamics that caused this.
Yeah, we're going to try to help with some information that, hey, hope maybe it'll be helpful.
Mhm.
So yeah, so basically, whenever you have trauma, it really sparks questions, because questions are like, it's like, what on earth is going on? So what are some of the dynamics that put us at risk of having these kinds of experiences? And I think it's really critical to understand the law enforcement culture, and as it
Mhm.
relates here in the United States. So
Right.
I'm a psychiatrist, and from time to time, you know, I will occasionally, let's say, get a client as like a police officer. From time to time, you get people from law enforcement,
Mhm.
because I just
Mhm.
see so many people. Uniform, in my experience with those officers, uniform is respect.
Yes.
Uniform, okay? It's as if when they are in a situation where they recognize, you know, that I don't know, that they're like, when they're encountering an authority figure, supreme respect. And what that informs me is how much they value respect. Like, so
Mhm.
these are some dynamics I want to be aware of. Also, the other dynamic you want to be aware of in law enforcement is the unpredictable nature of the job.
Right.
Like, things
Mhm.
get out of control really fast. So the other
Mhm.
thing, my sense is that law enforcement value a great deal is control, right? Respect and control.
Control.
So one of the things that can happen really quickly, and I'm not saying that's what happened here, but I just
Mhm.
think this allows us, let's try to understand each other, because maybe this might be relevant to some other situation that occurs. So now, one of the things that my sense is that is very triggering to law enforcement is when they feel like they're being disrespected, and or they don't have control. They don't have
Mhm.
control. Um, so what are some of the commands that law enforcement will give, you know, in an effort to assume control of the situation? And we saw it a lot of times in the videos. They will say things like, get on the ground. Now, as a civilian, can you imagine if somebody told you, get on the ground? If I said to you right now, time to get on the ground, what's the first
Mhm.
thing you're going to say?
Why?
Why?
Or
Why?
no.
Or
Right, but
no, like,
why?
there's
Mhm.
no need for that, you know. And obviously that's not how traffic stops start. That's not how they start. It's like things
Mhm.
escalate. But the bottom line is, what we want to kind of discuss is the dynamics of these things as they occur. Get on the Now here the person is attempting to assert authority, so they're going to say, now get on the ground. Now, one of the most interesting things is watching a person who is in the process of falling and observing the struggle they make to stay off the ground.
Mhm.
Now think about when you get dressed, if you're thinking, I want to be on the ground today. So now it's a knee jerk resistance. It's knee jerk. If you tell me get on the ground, right? It's a knee jerk. You'd be like, but why? And the minute you
Mhm.
say that, the minute there's resistance, now again, you get them feeling out of control and there's escalation. Now, here's the key: none of what I'm saying necessarily has anything to do with Tennessee. I'm not saying it does,
Into
but
Memphis.
I do think these are some dynamics we often don't think about. We
Right.
often don't think about. And so now you get this resistance, this conflict, and it just keeps escalating. It just keeps
Mhm.
escalating, because you're saying why, they're saying, well, you're looking subordinate, and it just keeps going up from there.
Yes, but officers are trained to de-escalate situations, and none of that happened
Yeah, that
in this
but
situation.
yeah, so what
Mhm.
what we observed there, we have no clue what sparked the escalation, and or if anything sparked the
Right.
escalation. Like we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know. Um, Obviously, all we can try to do is at times try to learn and say, okay, well, but that's the key. We have no idea what or if anything
Mm-hmm.
sparked that escalation. And
Mm-hmm.
that was one of the things that the police chief mentioned is they're still unclear what got
Mm-hmm.
them to a 10. She described it as a 10 out of 10 intensity.
Right. And she gave an amazing on Friday when I saw an interview with her. And from what she saw the video before we've all seen the video, and from the video and from being a trained, of course, police officer herself, knowing what should happen, they were fired immediately. They were fired immediately.
Yeah, in the video, it was refreshing to see a person get asked questions and they actually answer.
Mm-hmm.
It
Yeah, she
was
was very
refreshing.
clear.
It was refreshing to see her not try to sidestep responses, and
Mm-hmm.
she was just as clear as could be. No, this was wrong. She used very clear language. She still conveyed a love for law enforcement, but at the same time, just really frustrated that she saw nothing she could defend. She saw nothing
Yes.
she could defend, and she was not about to defend what was observed. It was just really tragic. It was
And I have to say this because I feel like it's the elephant in the room, that we have seen unarmed Black men be treated poorly by law enforcement, but never has there been such. And she did the right thing, but how swiftly they were able to fire the police, arrest the police, charge the police. Um, we have never seen it happen that quickly. And I know that I've heard, and I've even thought it myself, when they're Black police officers, which they were wrong and they should be arrested and charged, in my opinion. But when it's white police officers, it has taken in the past much longer. And so I do applaud the police chief of Memphis for moving so quickly and
right.
swiftly. And I think that, and if you notice, because I been watching the news, and even one of our daughters went with a whole bunch of friends to Memphis yesterday, and it was not for protest. It was they had already pre-bought tickets to a basketball game for the Memphis Grizzlies. It was a birthday present to one of the friends, and so I told her on Friday, I said, I don't know if I want you to go because if they're protesting, it could be dangerous. But because I think how swiftly the police chief acted, it has been peaceful protests. There hasn't been looting unless this has happened since the last time I saw the news a few hours ago. There hasn't been any looting and things like that, of destruction of property. There's been some protests all around the country, but there has not been looting and things like that. And I think
Well,
it's because of how quickly the police chief responded and how she
well,
responded.
well, it's funny because it's almost in her response. She responded almost as if like this had been done to her child. Like
Mm-hmm.
you saw you kind of got that sense, in her response. But we are talking about the fine art of taking responsibility,
Mm-hmm.
and how in taking responsibility, it's not like it brings on healing, but it's just that you move closer towards it. You move towards it because
Right.
now the person doesn't feel like they now have to justify or explain to you or make sure you see the tragic nature of the event. It's like you demonstrate clearly. She's demonstrating, look, I see this.
Right.
I see this. And so you can almost see that they're collaborative, like the police
Mm-hmm.
chief and the family. They move more towards being collaborative as opposed to combative. And of course, I think it then lets the population be a little calmer,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because what took place was savage. I mean, it was just
Yes.
savage.
It was. I like Zipper's comment. It says, "I see Christ inside Tyree's mother." She said she felt sorry for the police who were involved in the killing of her son. Wow, amazing. Yeah, I didn't hear that part, but I did hear a clip where she's, said that she is going to pray for their families as well. Like she said something like that, and I thought, wow, and that was on Friday. Such a response, such a Christian response to such a tragedy and such a deep loss that that she's experiencing, and to say something like that.
One thing that gives me pause is, why do we always need the Christian to not be entitled to righteous indignation?
Right.
Well,
that's good for the question that's on there now. What is our approach as Christians to combat these situations?
Right. Because I assure you that mother's entitled to some fury. She's entitled to it. She's entitled to it. And her fury would be Christian. Like that's the thing. That's the thing that people miss. Like Christ does not ask us to stop being human. He does not. It's not a prerequisite that we cut out the human experience. She's entitled to fury. Fury. And that wouldn't be any less Christian if she was furious. And words I can't even describe. So I think one of the things we need to do as Christians is allow people to have their human experience. That's what we need to do as Christians. And respect
and let them process.
And respect their entitlement to have their human experience. Because I think it's very unchristian to discount people's right to be infuriated when anybody in that situation would be infuriated. And I mean, like I'm putting words to something, like to watch what you gave birth to be treated that way is something, it's beyond comprehension.
I feel like as the only woman on the program, I have to say yes, to give something that you gave birth to, that was formed inside of you, that, this is your child.
It's part of you.
It's part of you. And so every mother in the country could feel her pain. Not that they have personally gone through the same thing, but just imagining that being their child. And it was there, and she's very transparent, almost like Emmett Till's mom. She wanted the video to be released.
Wow.
She wanted the video to be released. So yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. So what can we do as Christians? We should walk alongside our brother and do everything possible to understand what it is they're going through. Atante, I think I might have shared this with you before, but I saw the most interesting thing where it was on Instagram, I think, where this teenager was lying in the driveway face up in the rain. And the mom pulled her van in, avoiding hitting the kid, of course, got out, lied down next to the kid, looked up, and held her hand.
Wow.
Okay. That's the picture.
You never shared this with me before. So yeah, but that's powerful.
Okay. That's empathy. That's empathy.
Yes.
Obviously, all appropriate qualifiers, but please don't think you're doing something Christian when you insist, no, get up and let's get out of the rain. That's not, that to me is not Christian. That's not what Jesus did. Jesus came alongside us, joined us, and looked up.
Right.
And suffered with us, and did not dismiss our suffering. And I feel sometimes like we kind of hide behind Christianity and dismiss people's right to their human experience, especially as victims. Especially as victims, almost, be loving and I think that's wrong. That's wrong, and it makes people back away from the church.
Right. Yes. I agree. Just touching on this story again. I mean, like so many people, have said, typically, normally when this happens, it is typically a white police officer or a group of white police officers that a situation like this may that were involved. And of course, this time it is Black police officers. And so it has people thinking, what is the culture of policing in America? And how does that impact not just Black, but Black and brown and minority people? It seems to impact them the most. And so, kind of following that, are there biases?
Oh yes. So so biases are very pervasive. We see the question, and we'll come to it. So biases are pervasive, and when I say pervasive, I mean it's like it's all over the place. And what's interesting is it's we are actually impregnated, all of us, with bias. Okay. And so you might say, where does it come from? It comes from culture. And frankly, I believe it comes from media. It comes from what we observe. So you may be aware, Atanta, you're probably aware of mirror neurons. Have you heard of that?
Yes, but I don't know as much about it as you do.
So there was an Italian physician and a team of researchers, and the gentleman's named Giacomo Rizzolatti, and he actually discovered mirror neurons. And so what mirror neurons do is they respond to motor activity, but what was really profound is they also respond to observing motor activity. And there have been maybe about 800 studies now further, expanding on this issue.
Right.
But the implication being what you see profoundly impacts you. And where the research was going is when you're observing something, it's almost as if you're doing it yourself. It's like mirror neuron technology makes it so that like when you're looking at something, when you're observing it, it's almost like you're doing it yourself. It's triggering your motor neurons. So it's actually really profound. So much for people who think what I'm watching is not impacting me. No, it's impacting you, and it's impacting you profoundly. Now to my point, pervasive in our culture today, if you watch media, you see people of color being depicted in very subliminal and derogatory fashions, and sometimes it's not subliminal at all.
No, it's not. Just in negative ways.
But subliminal to where you don't even realize it. You see these story arcs where they conveniently put people of color in these horrible lights. And I'm saying, how much of that do you watch before you start getting impregnated with bias?
Right.
And you don't even realize it. And then there's this element. One of the things that's kind of unique to policing is it comes down to split-second decision-making. Split-second decision-making. Well, here's the thing. When you want to uncover the subconscious, when you want to uncover subconscious drivers, what you do is you reduce the decision-making down to split-second decision-making. So if you want to test something and you want to check a person's subconscious, what you do is you make them make the decision really quickly, absent cognitive involvement. And that's exactly what you can find a lot of times with life and death situations. It's fast, it's split second. And so I mentioned all of us being impregnated with these biases. Well, what's the difference between the dominant culture versus the non-dominant culture? I'm impregnated with those biases. I watch those movies too. What's the difference? Well, because of the culture that I'm immersed in, I actually see counters to the bias. I know Black physicians. I know Black attorneys. I know, Black. I asked the friend if I could use the illustration. She has like sons that are like 6'5", and she says they often experience pretty hostile interactions with police, and because of I mentioned control before. She said they're incredibly respectful, but they look fearful.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, at the end of the day, though, it doesn't make any sense. Like one of them is a graphic artist, not a graphic artist, a what do you call these people that design clothes?
A, a
In,
clothes designer.
not clothes. There's a word for
The seam. Oh, they
you know
make the clothes. So a
fashion
seamstress.
fashion designer. He's a
Fashion
fashion designer.
design. Okay,
That's
fashion
fashion
designer.
designer. You
Okay,
know, it's like you want, but they don't usually come in these 6'5" frames. But
right.
that's the reality. So you
Mm-hmm.
can't judge by the exterior. But the bottom line is just, I'm saying it helps as a person of color to have experiences that counter my
Mm-hmm.
biases. So that helps me. But if
Mm-hmm.
you're in a situation where you don't have a counter to the bias, now you can become more subjected to it. What were you?
Yes. Well, I kind of want to, just for the sake of time, I want to
Yeah,
maybe get to this question.
sure.
Um, how do we deal with the compounded impact of police assault on Black and Brown communities, the utter anguish, sorrow, anxiety, trauma, etc.? And that's why I couldn't watch the video, because I felt like it would cause a vicarious trauma. I would feel traumatized by watching it, just because a lot of people, and I was watching, I think it was The View today. One of the View hosts said that she really, um, just really feels she's never had to have the talk with her children that all of us that have Black sons, but then, just Black children, really, now, the talk of how you behave and how you act if you come into encounter a police officer, because it's so dangerous. And so, but it can be so dangerous. Let me not put a blanket statement out there like that. It can be dangerous, if you don't behave correctly, and being a person of color, where white people don't have to do that. And so, just the trauma of, and I want to share a real quick story. I was in the Bay Area. This was probably 4 or 5 years ago now. And I was tired one morning. I had to drive my daughter early because she was going on a field trip somewhere, and I had to go early. And I really wasn't paying attention what lane I was in. But by that time, I guess the carpool lane was closing, or it was closed. And so the police officer, put on his lights to pull me over. And I just, wasn't aware. But as soon as I got pulled over, my purse was at my legs, and I thought, let me get my ID. But as soon as I went down to get the ID, I said, no, let me not reach down, and let me just wait for him to come to the door so he can see what I'm doing. Like, and I just wonder, I was like, do white people think about that? Like, I thought about that. And I'm not a criminal, or have never actually committed a crime to be arrested, but it's that kind of fear. So that fear, can cause trauma.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I sympathize with you. How do we deal with the compounded impact of police assault on Black and Brown communities, the utter anguish, the sorrow, the anxiety, the trauma, the etc.? I think that's what we're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to ask questions. We're trying to answer questions. We're trying to have the conversation, because what we don't think is going to help anything is to avoid having these uncomfortable, conversations.
Right.
I think we all have to look at what role can we play in combating this. And I guess I went through that laborious discussion about mirror neurons and the multimedia, Tante, because
Okay.
I want people to connect some things that may not
Mm-hmm.
be obviously connected. If we keep projecting these images that misrepresent a faction of people, and that continues to impregnate us with those images, and we end up with a subliminal subconscious sense that these people are dangerous and inferior and always the butt of the jokes, never get it. These things are going to continue,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to start saying, wait a second, we've got to change
Mm-hmm.
in a huge way how we perceive one another,
Right.
because they're connected. We don't think they're connected, but it's connected. What were you going to say, sis?
Well, first, I have to say that the person who asked that question is actually a very dear friend of mine. I never looked up at the names. I'm sorry. Hi, Yemi. Thank you for watching with us. I'm like, oh, wow, that was Yemi's question. Oh, man. Love you, Yemi. He's a really good friend. Anyways, yeah, so I agree. There's a comment on here. Oh, did it go away? Somebody said we need to have more open forums to open up with each other and get better understanding of each other's outlooks. I mean, like, yes, that's true. I mean, that could be helpful. This situation that that happened in Memphis is I think you said it when we talked yesterday, Dr. White, like it makes no sense. It makes no sense why they would do this.
It makes no sense. And I think, I think the reality is I doubt those officers would have treated someone from the dominant culture that way. Let's just put it out,
Right.
So this was not just blanket, violence. And that's where I think the bias comes in. And I think they would say, no, you're crazy. It had nothing to do with color. And that to me is the interesting part about bias. We never acknowledge it. We don't think it exists. They'd be like, nah, that had nothing to do with that. And the reality is we don't know the details. We don't know the details. There's all these rumors going on around, social media about other things that may have drove it that have nothing to do with race. So I get it. But the reality is it does spark a conversation that we have to have about bias and power differentials and how we can reduce power differentials so that there can be more justice and we can respect people's humanities more effectively. Was it something that I said? All right, so let me take a look at some of your comments. So I see Emojine Wright say, I was pulled over for speeding. I was so afraid of him coming to my car. I nearly passed out. I'm sorry that happened to you, sis. It makes sense when that, and then Andrea Valiente said, it makes sense when that's what the system was set up to do. Wow. Well, you can see how it's time for us to change that system, Andrea. It's definitely time for us to change that system. And you should never have to feel that way, says Clint Ives. And then Yemi, love you, Tante. Thanks for holding space tonight to process this horrific murder. I feel sick. I mean, the pain from watching this, it was just so overwhelming. Andrea said the details are these cops were from an anti-crime unit. This unit was created to terrorize the community. Well, Andrea, here's the interesting thing. The term scorpion, oh, doesn't that sound, vicious? Well, here's what the scorpion actually is an acronym for. Memphis Police Chief Saralyn Davis said that SCORPION stands for Street Crimes Operations to Restore Peace in Our Neighborhood. Let me repeat that again. Street Crimes Operation to Restore Peace in Our Neighborhood. And she further highlighted that by, as they looked at the impact that the Scorpion unit had over the course of the year, there were actually some positive data that had come out in terms of them having some kind of positive impact. But of course, now this event was going to overshadow all of that. So I just want to share what she mentioned about that, so I don't know, obviously I don't live in Memphis, so I don't know what their impact was on the community, but that was the perspective of Chief Saralyn Davis. Okay, let me see. When people who have power tripping issues and are given positions of power, this is what happens, unfortunately. Yeah, obviously, if you get in power, but you don't know how to use the power, obviously. Let's see. So we got to change the system, and let me see. If you try to counter your charge, you're surrendering your Miranda rights. If you try to counter your charge, so Elijah, you probably have some kind of legal expertise that I'm not, aware of. So whatever you say will be used against you no matter what. And so this is where, It's interesting because I've heard that before. Hey, you see some of these YouTube videos. I don't answer. And it's like, to me, these at times are behaviors that just kind of escalate things rather than, hey, just trying to get home. Anyway, I'm no legal expert, so consult your attorney as to how best to respond. I know my objective usually is to communicate to the officer that I mean no threat to you. I'd like you to get home, and I'd like to get home, and let's call it a day. But that statement I just made oversimplifies the discussion, because the real discussion is, what if you have a bad day? What if you as a person of color have a bad day? It shouldn't be a capital offense.
Right. You shouldn't lose your right.
It should not be a capital offense for you to have a bad day. And for those of you who say, well, I would respect the police, all you need is a phone call where your daughter's like, hey, somebody's trying to get at me. And maybe you're speeding towards her now. And I'm just creating a scenario where you are now in a heightened state and somebody's trying to pull you over, something like that. I'm obviously not championing that you break any laws. Do not break laws. All I'm saying is it does not take a lot of imagination for some situation to put you in a heightened state.
Mm-hmm.
That should not be a capital offense. It should not be a capital offense, especially when you look right over to somebody else who's of a different hue and you see that they're much worse than you are, and it doesn't end up fatal.
Mm-hmm. Somebody put in the chat that was much earlier in the hour that, and there's in my practice when I was in California, there was a time where I just had so many police officers and their families in for therapy. And I just learned a lot kind of about the culture and some of the problems that happen even with their marriages and within the families because of the stress that they're under. And when I asked them about the mental health training or classes that they go through, not only to be police officers because they're under so much stress, and then also how to just be able to bring that down so that they can go home in a different state than they are on the job. They said they have about 4 weeks of training of that. Wow. 4 weeks of mental health training. It's not enough.
Yeah.
It should be ongoing. It should be ongoing.
Like they frequently get, additional training, additional accountability.
Right. I mean, I know as mental health professionals, to renew your license, you have to have so many continued education courses or things like that the certain different states and licensing boards want you to do. It should definitely be on that even greater than on that level, I think.
I've heard from law enforcement. I've had law enforcement who told me that communication was their greatest weapon. Like that was
to de-escalate a situation.
The ability to de-escalate. Like they told me their communication skill they utilized way more than their firearm. In fact, many rarely use their firearm, but the power to de-escalate, the power to. Oh, and by the way, I'm not speaking figuratively outside the situation. I end up having to deal with very escalated people, very agitated, and in a very mentally compromised state. So, yeah, we have to encounter these people.
Because I was going to say this too. Like, I'm always really aware. This just happened this past weekend. I mean, because I work on a college campus, and there's times where we have to, call in other resources if the mental health challenges are beyond my scope, or the person's life they're in danger of hurting themselves. And so when I have to call in for a involuntary type of situation, I definitely talk to the 911 person that I'm speaking to, letting them know the situation. I talk with the EMTs when they get there to let them know, like, hey, this doesn't have to be an aggravated situation. This person is, not violent, and they're knowing that they need to go in. And so, just please be very careful. I'm almost because these are young Black men and women that I'm servicing, that they are, coming to have to take in for psychiatric evaluation. So I never want the student or this young African American student to get agitated because there's EMT there, or first responders, or even the police officers are there. But I'm always talking to them to make sure that it's just not the situation doesn't escalate to where it could go.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's funny because you have police on Oakwood's campus.
We do. Their
And
camp. They are police.
And it seems they're very embedded in the community.
They are. So when I'm calling outside of Oakwood's police. I'm calling.
Right. But I just remember I remember the police chief, like we were at the orientation, and the chief, he was like, "Hey, take down my number."
Right.
And just let everybody in the room take down his number. And I remember accessing that number when I needed it at one point.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember how helpful he was in, getting in touch with our kid at the time. So you can see they're very embedded in the community. And
the Oakwood police is not my concern. It's when police are coming from the community. That's always my concern. Or even when, paramedics are coming from the community. I just want to make sure that the students are handled with the respect and care that they should,
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess I'm sad when these situations misrepresent good law enforcement. I guess that's it. Like, cause it's sad because it just casts a shadow, and it's tragic when that happens. The bottom line is we need change. What were you going to say, sis?
Well, I was kind of going to piggyback to what I had already kind of addressed, is that there just needs to be more training, even though police officers, according to many other police officers that this type of thing doesn't happen, they are trained to de-escalate, but there needs to be more training on that. And again, we don't even know if this situation really, it got out of control, obviously, but if the person actually did something to, make the police officers respond in that way. Not in that way, but just to respond in a negative way. And even if they did, there has to be a process to where a person can be arrested and not lose their life.
Right. We just don't know the details as to what led up to this and how, but I guess even the police chief is just like, this just cannot be justified. Just like under no circumstance. There's nothing imaginable that would justify it is what her basic premise was. And that seemed really.
And I think it just speaks volumes that these officers were Black. The police chief was Black. She's Black and a woman, and she acted so swiftly to handle the situation. And I think, if she would not have acted so swiftly, they would have said we had like a double standard. But no, she did the right thing across the board that should happen all the time, no matter what the color of the police officers are.
And Andrea, you see Andrea Valiente's comment?
Yes, that's another good friend. Hi, Andrea.
You got some.
I got all my friends on tonight. It's the topic. It's the topic.
She said there's no good law enforcement. There's people who sign up to be law enforcement that have good intentions, but when it comes down to it, the power structure and the culture does not allow a system. I would definitely oppose that. My father worked in law enforcement. And not that he's necessarily the representation per se of, but I know police who are good people and intend on being good people. And I know that there are police who provide a service and a meaningful service. And when things go bump in the night, you call, and they come, and so I'm not gonna let these kind of events blanket the whole thing.
Right.
And that mentality does not allow us to get to a table to sit and talk.
Right.
There is no dialogue from a perspective of, none of you are any good, or the whole system, like that doesn't facilitate that.
Right.
I think we have to recognize that, there's good, there's bad, and let's get to a table to where we can eliminate the bad. So
And I think, and I mean, and I can't speak for Andrea. I mean, I know her well though. She's a very good friend, but I think maybe she's speaking of the culture of policing more than not that there aren't any good police officers. I mean, again, along with you, I can personally testify that there are definitely great police officers that work and to serve their community. I've had very good experiences with some that have been extremely kind and gone over and beyond than what they've had to do, and I've appreciated that at the times that we've had to come into interaction with them. I think, and I'll say this again. I've heard people say when this happened, how could Black men do that to another Black man? And what someone said is, when they take on the police uniform, it's no longer about like, oh, we're Black men together, but the culture of policing is the greatest thing at this time. And so sometimes that culture can lead to such very aggressive behavior. And so I think that's what some people are looking at and thinking, and that's what they're saying. What are your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are, there are rumors that this was not policing. Okay.
Right.
There are rumors that there was a vendetta, and so here we can start talking about policing when it had nothing to do. Well, I mean, they were in a position of power, abusing power, but
right.
I just mean, it's not like they were trying to de-escalate per se. Like, there are rumors that there were other things in play. And so that's why it's like, we really can't talk about what was really going on until we know the dynamics of that situation. So now that statement may actually better categorize some of the other situations that have gone down. But we've got to understand what motivated them, what was actually going on, because there's some scary rumors going on that like this was more of a vendetta or something like that, just some out there stuff,
And even if that rumor is true, it's still a horrible thing that they did, and then the other guys joined in. But also people seem, I mean, I heard this as well, or I read about this, is that the EMT were there and they didn't provide services. They didn't provide services right away. I mean, he was eventually taken to the hospital and died there, but if they would have provided services, health services to him at that time, maybe he would have lived, possibly. But they also stood on the sidelines as well. So it just really, really was a bad situation all around. The policing, the EMT.
I think I saw some news reports where some of them lost their jobs as well. Something like that. I don't know.
As they should. I would hope they would have lost their jobs. They should have lost their jobs. Yes. So there's all kinds of comments and questions.
I was once a criminal justice major in Nebraska, and what distinguished me was that one of the textbooks featured only Black criminals from cover to cover. I changed my major. Natasha Days. That's profound.
Yes. So, yes, we can discuss this as we go forward, but I think it's, continue to discuss it it could go on. And we're going a little bit longer today because we started a little bit late. So yeah, Andrea,
but that's interesting. But that was an interesting comment though. Like, wow, imagine if that was a reality where like the focus was really on depicting Black criminals, that's interesting. That's interesting. Now we're not experts in the training, but that's interesting, Natasha.
Let's see.
You can also see the spirit of the enemy in our full force. This is Ka. Ka, you need to put a face on that picture so that we know who we're talking about. Because I bet you anything the dog did not type this. Doesn't matter what color anyone is. We're living in the last days. We will see violence increase. We need the heart and mind of Jesus.
Yes, that sin does cause, of course, these problems. But I do believe that, kind of going back to what Dr. White was saying, that the biases that people create because of media, because of so many different things, when you're in positions of power over people, if those biases are negative biases, they can come out in what you're doing. And if that's policing, then it can come out during that time.
I agree. You need the Spirit of Jesus. You need the Spirit of Jesus that stood up for that woman who was, accused of adultery. I think you need the Spirit of Jesus who he attacked those that were selling in the sanctuary because they were disrupting people's ability to pray. What do you think this does to people trying to pray when they see this kind of stuff? Right. Yeah, you need the Spirit of Jesus. It should inspire you to want to do something about it. You need the Spirit of Jesus. When he healed people, even though the people were saying, you know what, it's not legal to do that. And he's like, no, pick your mat up. We should not over spiritualize these things and let it look the other way.
Right.
Because no, actually, Jesus looked right at it. He looked right at it, and it's a misunderstanding of Jesus. If we don't see the depths to which he cared about these issues, it's a tragic misunderstanding of Jesus. And it's a Jesus the young people say, if your Jesus is that irrelevant to such core issues, he's irrelevant to me. And it's a misrepresentation because Jesus cared.
He does
care. He cared deeply. When that woman was thrown at his feet naked, he didn't just say, this is no big deal. He called them all out. He showed them all their hypocrisy. He wrote it in the sand. He could have said, nah, I'm too busy for this. I'm about to go die on a cross. Nah, he's like, nah, I'll pause for this one. I'll pause for this. I'll address this.
Yes, this is just something that, and it's funny because Zipper is the handle name, but I don't know what his name is. So maybe put in the chat because I see Zipper on when we come on live at other times. But he said, I'm a former EMT, and we should provide life-saving medical treatment without prejudice of any kind. And of course, because you're just trying to save a life, no matter what what the color of the person of that life that you're trying to save. And that's why the situation is so strange, because it's almost as if the EMTs weren't allowed to. I mean, they were on the sidelines. And when I say allowed, I mean, they're seeing the guy in this situation, and it's almost like they, again, I guess, weren't allowed to run in on the situation. I mean, this is me, casting what I'm thinking could have happened, because I just can't understand why they would stand on the sidelines if they were able to get in there. This wasn't, it just doesn't make any sense.
I think what's helpful is looking at these things through the lens of, look, man, if I was in that situation, how would I behave? If I was the supervising police officer, how would I behave? If I was the subordinate police, how would I behave? If I was the EMT on that, how would I behave? Because
if I were the,
because you know why? You are going to be presented with something similar in your current role. You are entrusted with influence. And the question,
if I were
how would you wield that influence? Over to you, Atanya.
If I was just going to say, if I were the EMT and these police officers were doing what they were doing, and I'm trained to go and save a life, I would call the police on the police to say, look, there's a situation here. I mean, the fact that, and I think this is why they were fired today. Someone's saying that they were all three fired, which they should have been, because they should have done something to save his life as well. Like, they're all accountable for this man's loss, the loss of life.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking at it from the standpoint of, hey, I want to hope that I would do the right thing in the situation, regardless of what pressures, regardless of what feeling that, hey, maybe my life would be in jeopardy now if I'm doing this, regardless of if they said, no, you can't touch this person. Hopefully you would still have the courage to do the right thing. And a lot of times you got to realize these scenarios, they're not labeled. You don't know that this is going to blow up into a national incident. So So a lot of times we think we're acting in obscurity until it just blows up. But what we want to pray for, like, because I hear a lot of invoking of Jesus, what we want to pray for is that we will have the courage to really and truly embody what Jesus would do in the situation. What would he
Yes.
do? Like, will we have the courage to do that? That's the prayer. That's the prayer.
Right.
Because you'd be surprised at the pressure to not. Right now, there's a pressure to look the other way right now. You know, I mean, even
Right.
as we sit here, the goal is, hey, why do we have to talk about this? Let's not talk about this. Let's talk about something else. And we can
No.
conveniently hide and talk about something else and not miss the reality that, look, we're at risk of making a mistake. We're at risk of saying the wrong thing. But we'll take that risk, because what we don't want is on Judgment Day, we be asked, you had a platform, why didn't you use it to shine a spotlight on injustice? Because I was afraid I would say the wrong thing, because I was afraid my words would come back to bite me. They might, but I'd rather make that mistake than to just look the other way.
I think since we're talking about prayer, we need to pray that God will uncover or reveal to us what our biases are about different cultures, or, you know, that of different people who don't look like us. Like, we need to be aware of that. And because
what she said.
I'm sorry.
What you said just now. What you said.
Because, well, you know, we think we don't have those biases.
And they're there.
But many of us, we do.
And not just biases, fear.
Fear. Well, those biases turn into fear.
Because there's one thing about bias. The other is, do you have the courage to leverage your influence when it might be at risk to you? That's the thing. That's the thing. And so there's this Martin Luther King quote that talks about, yeah, evil is not here because of the evil. It's because the good stay silent. Not because there's going to be bad people, but when the good stay silent, that's the real problem. That's the real problem.
Right.
And silence can be so convenient. I'm too busy. I got so many other things going on. Rather than,
I don't want to get involved.
I don't want to get involved. Jesus is coming soon. You know, Jesus is coming soon. We don't have time for this.
No, we have to have time for this. We have to have time for this, but it's, yeah, it's unfortunate. But again, there are certain communities that live in fear of police officers, just because of, not that anything has maybe happened to them, but them seeing things happen to other people in their community and people of color. And vicariously through that, they have trauma and they have fear. And so that should not be the case. That shouldn't be the case. No community should ever fear people who are supposed to, that have been sworn in to protect us.
Yeah.
So,
well,
yes.
you know, the hope is that we move towards, like, one profound thing that you get from Chief Saralyn Davis's action is, like, it's a message. You're not going to be protected when you do these things. Like, that's a message. That's a message, because if people start to feel like, oh my goodness, I'm not going to get protection when I engage in this behavior, they start saying, you know, it looks like the tide is really shifting, and engaging in these.
That's what I love about what she did. And she was so quick. She was so swift and quick about it. I love that what she did, that if in the culture of policing, they can realize, or if they can recognize that, or believe that if I do this, if I lose it and don't act according to the way I was trained, I could go to prison.
Or I'm not going to get protected. I'm not going to get protected.
Right.
So I really am going to be accountable to my behavior. Well, then you start thinking, well, maybe I can't behave that way. Yeah.
Right.
So
Yes.
yeah. It is what it is.
Yes. And so we are a little bit over our time. It was quite a hot topic
Again,
tonight.
sincerest
but
condolences to the family.
yes,
I can't
definitely
say that
praying for the
enough.
family.
And the community that's connected to this gentleman.
I am proud of the Memphis community right now because from what I'm seeing, again, there's peaceful protests. I haven't heard, and again, unless that started happening while we've been live on the air, I haven't heard of destruction of property or any further loss of life or anything like that. And so they are, protesting what happened peacefully, which is the right thing to do. If they, it's just the right thing to do. But definitely our prayers go to the family. This is just a very hard and difficult situation for them and any family, and just for that community. Our prayers are for that community as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. So we want to thank you for tuning in to Mental Health Mondays. I mean, if you want to put it under a category, I guess this would be under trauma, right? Yeah. We're talking about trauma. So many communities have been impacted by trauma through things like this, but we just thought it was really important to talk about what's on everybody's hearts and mind, and all the comments and even the numbers, the viewership this evening, live viewership, I should say, is higher than normal. So it's definitely been on your hearts and minds.
And we wanted to obliterate that stereotype, but just because your colleague isn't saying anything about it, it doesn't mean they're not thinking about it and being impacted deeply from it. So that's another thing that we wanted you to be aware of. Atante, again, I just want to really applaud you for coming up with the idea for us to think about this and talk about this. Forgive us, if we did something wrong, but this is we'd rather make that error than not talk about it.
Right. No. And this is Living Manna Church. This is not the first time we have tackled issues of this nature. So yeah, we talk about everything. We talk about everything, which, is so important. You want to be able to go to places of prayer, and they're talking about the real issues that people are facing in their life. And these are real issues that some people are facing. So we don't want to ignore them and act like they don't exist, because they do exist. So
yes,
but
take care of your mental health. Please don't expose yourself to this, stuff, and not recognize that, you do have to be intentional at times of saying, you know what, I have to limit my viewership of that, because, especially if you have children as well watching, in the midst, please be sure that you are intentional about handling this kind of media very carefully. A lot of times with kids, people say, hey, I wonder, what do I say to my kids? And sometimes it's more asking them questions to hear what their thoughts are, more so, telling them. And of course, you can contact your mental health, provider for more specific advice about how you should handle these things. Over to you, sis.
Yes. Well, we are this has been a great conversation. Thank you for your comments and your questions. You definitely make the program as you add your input and ask your questions. We will be here again next week with another mental health topic. And so we invite you to come back and visit with us, and to share this link with your families and your family and your friends, because these are the topics that are on so many people's minds. Mental health is something that affects, if it hasn't affected you, it's affected somebody that you know, or a family member, or somebody that you love. And so we're always talking about mental health topics that will help you grow as an individual, and hopefully give you, enough information and knowledge to be able to just be there for someone else who may be going through something, which everybody is going through something. So definitely share this link, and we look forward to seeing you next week for Mental Health Mondays. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.